Emily Carter arrived at Riverstone Marketing on a cold Monday morning, her nerves mixed with excitement as she stepped through the tall glass doors. She had moved from Seattle to Toronto only a few weeks earlier, hoping for a fresh start after a difficult year, one filled with change, loss, and the feeling that she had somehow drifted away from the life she once knew. She carried only two things that morning: a new job offer and the hope that this place could be the beginning of something better. The moment she entered the lobby, she felt a pulse of energy in the air. Employees rushed past with coffee cups, and folders' voices echoing through the open space. Everything seemed faster, brighter, louder than she expected. She tried to steady her breathing. "It's just a job," she told herself. "You've handled harder things." But what she couldn't know, was that this ordinary morning would change everything. She checked in with the front desk and was told to wait for her supervisor. As she stood there, adjusting the strap of her bag, she noticed a man at the far end of the hallway. He seemed completely out of place in the rush of movement around him. He wasn't hurrying or multitasking like the others. He stood still, calm, like he belonged to a different moment in time. His eyes lifted toward her as though he had been expecting her. This was Daniel Hayes, the man she had only seen in her welcome email, her new boss. But the real version of him felt nothing like the picture. His presence had weight, not intimidating, but steady, strong, almost comforting. He was in his mid-30s, tall, with carefully kept dark hair and eyes that carried something deeper, something that made her feel seen and unsettled at the same time. He approached her with a quiet confidence that didn't feel forced. "You must be Emily," he said, offering a warm smile. His voice was calm, smooth, and unexpectedly gentle. "Welcome to Riverstone Marketing. We've been waiting for you." The words were simple. Anyone could have said them, but the way he said them slowly, with meaning, made Emily pause for a heartbeat. She wasn't used to being welcomed like that. For a moment, she forgot she was standing in a corporate office. For a moment, something in his tone made her feel like she mattered. "Thank you," she managed to say, hoping her voice didn't give away her sudden nervousness. Daniel motioned for her to follow him, and she walked beside him through the hallway. The office was a maze of open desks, glass panels, and soft chatter. People glanced in their direction, some offering polite smiles, others curious looks. Emily wondered if they always watched new employees this way, but Daniel didn't seem affected by it. His stride was steady, confident, and she found herself trying to keep up. "You came at the perfect time," he said as they walked. "We're preparing for a big campaign, and I think your creativity will help us a lot." His belief in her felt almost strange. They barely knew each other, yet he spoke like he already trusted her. It gave her a small boost of courage she didn't know she needed. He brought her to her new workspace, a bright corner near the large windows that overlooked a line of maple trees. The sunlight spilled across her desk, warm and soft. She liked it immediately. "I picked this spot for you," Daniel said casually. "You mentioned in your interview that light helps you focus." Emily froze slightly. She remembered saying that, but she didn't think it mattered enough for someone like him to remember. Something in her chest, warm gratitude, mixed with surprise. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. He shrugged. "Good work starts where people feel comfortable." It was such a simple statement, but she could tell he meant it. There was an honesty in him that made her feel safe, but also cautious. She barely knew him, yet she felt the pull of wanting to understand him as he showed her how things worked, the system. The files, the upcoming deadlines. Emily noticed details she couldn't ignore. He had a habit of pausing before speaking, as though carefully choosing his words. He carried a quiet sadness behind his calm expressions, the kind that only shows itself if someone is paying close attention. She didn't know why she noticed. Maybe she was reading too much into it. But something told her there was more to him than the confident leader the office admired. The morning moved quickly. She met her team, learned her tasks, and tried her best to settle in. Yet every time Daniel walked by, even briefly, she felt her heartbeat shift. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was more like curiosity mixed with an unexpected familiarity, as if she had known him in another life. At lunchtime, she stepped into the hallway and saw him talking to another department head. His voice was professional, steady. But when his eyes drifted toward her, they softened, just slightly. It was subtle, but enough to make her look away quickly. She wasn't used to being noticed by someone like him. And she definitely wasn't used to the strange flutter that formed in her chest whenever he was near. Later, she walked to the break room. She overheard two coworkers talking in hushed voices. "Daniel seems different today," one said. "Yeah." The other replied, calmer, almost hopeful. Emily kept walking, pretending not to hear. She didn't want to assume anything. She didn't want to read too deep. But their words stayed in her mind. By afternoon, she had finished reviewing her first project. She stepped into the hallway to hand Daniel the file, but he wasn't in his office. The door was slightly open, lights dimmed, papers neatly arranged on his desk. She knocked softly and waited. No answer. She turned to leave, but then she heard footsteps behind her. "Emily." She turned around, a little startled. Daniel stood there in the quiet hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one for her. "I wasn't sure what you liked," he said, "so I guessed." She took it, gently. "Thank you. That's really thoughtful." He looked at her for a moment longer than expected, but not inappropriate. More like he was searching for something he couldn't say. "We're glad you're here," he said softly. Emily felt something shift inside her, a small spark of warmth she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know it then. But this moment, this simple exchange in a quiet hallway, was the beginning of a story neither of them were prepared for. A story shaped by timing, fate, and emotions neither could ignore. What she also didn't know was that this quiet calm in Daniel's eyes was only the surface. Beneath it was a truth waiting to break through. A truth that would change her life in a way she never imagined. And the day wasn't even over. The weeks following Emily's arrival rushed by faster than she expected. Every day felt like a whirlwind of meetings, ideas, and new responsibilities, yet she never felt overwhelmed. Part of that comfort came from Daniel, carried a quiet steadiness that made even the busiest days feel manageable. He guided, supported, and encouraged without ever overstepping. She admired how he treated everyone from interns to directors with the same calm respect. But there was something else about him that she noticed almost immediately. He worked too hard, stayed too late, and often looked like he was fighting thoughts no one else could see. Still, he showed up every day with the same polite smile. It made Emily wonder what he hid behind that composed exterior. Their connection grew naturally. Not romantically, not yet, but in a way that people understand each other without speaking much. When she was frustrated, he noticed before she said a word. When she solved a problem, he celebrated her success more than she did. She had worked for many managers before, but none had made her feel so capable. One Thursday evening, long after most employees had left, Emily stayed behind to finish a last-minute project. The office was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that made her aware of her own breathing. She enjoyed the peace after a busy day, but then she saw a faint light coming from the meeting room. Curiosity tugged at her. She walked slowly toward it, expecting to find the cleaning staff or maybe someone finishing paperwork. But when she reached the doorway, her steps stopped. Daniel was sitting alone at the conference table. His tie was loosened, his posture slightly slouched, and in front of him sat a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. He looked completely different from the confident leader she saw in the daytime. This version of him seemed almost fragile, lost in thoughts, too heavy to speak. Emily hesitated. She didn't want to invade his space, but something about his expression made her step inside. "Daniel," she said gently. He turned sharply, as If he hadn't expected anyone, his eyes widened for a moment before softening with recognition. "Oh, Emily, I didn't realize anyone else was still here." She offered a small smile. "Long day." He tried to laugh, but it came out weak. "Something like that?" Emily walked closer, stopping on the other side of the table. "You look tired more than usual." He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "I'm fine, just thinking." "Too much about work?" she asked. He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, not work." That surprised her. Daniel always talked about work. He rarely let personal things slip through. She waited, not pushing, giving him space. A few seconds passed before he spoke again. "Sometimes I sit here because it's quieter than home," he said softly. "The silence there feels heavier." Emily felt a quiet ache in her chest. She didn't know the details of his life, but she could tell he carried something he didn't know how to share. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know you felt that way." He gave her a faint smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "No reason you should. I'm good at hiding it." The air between them grew heavier, not uncomfortable, but honest in a way she wasn't prepared for. She had never seen her boss this open, this unguarded. She thought their conversation would end there, but then he stood and walked a little closer, stopping just a few feet from her. His voice softened in a way she had never heard before. "Emily, I need to say something." Her heart quickened. Not out of fear, but from the weight. In his tone, "I know I'm your boss," he said, "and I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm about to say." She held her breath. "You make the office feel less empty," he said quietly. "I didn't expect that." Emily froze. His words weren't inappropriate. They weren't romantic. They weren't crossing any line, but they were honest, deeply honest, and they shook her more than she wanted to admit. There was no flirtation in his voice, just a sincerity that felt raw. "Daniel." She began, unsure what to say. He looked away briefly, as if embarrassed he had said too much. "I'm not expecting anything. I just wanted you to know that your presence makes things lighter. You bring a kind of calm I haven't felt in a long time." Emily felt warmth rush to her chest. She wasn't sure how to respond without making it awkward. She cared about him maybe more than she should, but she didn't want to complicate anything. She opened her mouth to speak. But before she could say a word, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Both of them turned their heads sharply. Someone was approaching, a shadow past the glass wall. A moment later, the HR manager, Linda, appeared in the doorway, holding a stack of files. She looked surprised to find both of them standing there together. "Oh, sorry," Linda said. "I didn't realize anyone was still in the building." Daniel quickly stepped back, his calm expression returning instantly. "Just finishing up," he said politely. Linda nodded and left, but the interruption had changed everything. The moment between them, quiet, honest, vulnerable, dissolved as quickly as it had formed. Emily felt the tension shift, the air returning to something more neutral. "I should finish my work," she said softly, not wanting to make things uncomfortable. Daniel nodded, but there was something in his eyes, something conflicted, that made her pause. "Emily," he said gently, "I hope I didn't make things strange." "You didn't," she replied, and she meant it. But as she walked back to her desk, her thoughts raced. She had seen a different side of him, one he didn't show to anyone else, a side that felt almost too personal for a workplace. She wasn't sure what to make of it. She didn't want to overthink. She didn't want to assume, but she couldn't. Forget the way he said those words. "You make the office feel less empty." Later that night, long after she left the building, the memory of that moment still lingered. She replayed it again and again, questioning why it mattered so much, and why it felt like the beginning of something she didn't know how to name. What she didn't know was that the late-night moment they shared would not stay secret for long, because by morning, the office was buzzing. By the next morning, Emily sensed something was wrong the moment she stepped into the office. People who usually greeted her with warm smiles now exchanged quick glances, whispered behind coffee cups, and shifted uncomfortably when she walked by. She felt eyes on her, felt conversations pause whenever she got close. A strange tension hung in the air, thin, sharp, and unmistakable. She didn't understand it at first. She tried to focus on her tasks, telling herself it was her imagination. But as the hours passed, the stares grew clearer, the whispers louder. It was impossible to ignore. During a break, she walked past two coworkers near the elevator. They didn't see her coming. "Did you hear? Emily and Daniel were alone last night," one whispered, and really late, the other added. "I saw the meeting room light." They must have been talking about something. Emily stopped walking. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't done anything inappropriate. Nothing even close. She and Daniel had only shared a simple, honest conversation. But rumors didn't care about the truth. They always crawled into places where facts didn't matter. She quietly stepped away before they noticed her. She didn't want to hear more. She didn't want to know how far the gossip had spread. As she walked back to her desk, she saw Daniel step out of his office. Even from a distance, she could tell he sensed something was off too. His eyes scanned the room, sharp but calm. Taking in the strange energy, their eyes met. For a moment, everything around them blurred. He didn't smile, not like before. Instead, concern flashed in his expression. He understood. He knew Dot without saying a word. He gestured for her to come to his office. Emily hesitated. She didn't want to feed the rumors. But she also knew she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. She walked into his office, and he quietly closed the door behind her. "Emily," he said softly, "I'm aware of what's going on." She looked at him, exhaustion pulling on her voice. "People are talking. They think something happened last night." Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen. I never wanted you to feel uncomfortable or judged because of me." She shook her head. "You didn't do anything wrong. Neither of us did." He sat across from her, leaning forward slightly. "Rumors spread fast here. I should have known that. I should have been more careful." Emily felt a pinch in her chest. "Why should you be careful about talking to me? We're adults." "It was just a conversation," Cassie said. "But people don't see it that way." She lowered her eyes, frustrated. "I don't want others to think I'm getting special treatment." "You're not," he said, his voice firm. "Everything you've earned here is because of your work." Emily believed him. She always had. But the weight of the rumors still sat heavily on her shoulders. There was a pause, long enough for both of them to feel the unspoken tension between them. Then Daniel exhaled slowly, as if preparing himself. "Emily, there's something I should tell you. Not because of the rumors, but because you deserve honesty." She met his eyes, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "My marriage ended last year," he said quietly, "after a long time of pretending things were okay." Emily felt her breath catch. She didn't expect that. "Not from him. Not today. I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded, staring at his hands. It was painful. Not dramatic. Not angry. Just empty. Two people drifting apart until there was nothing left. His voice didn't break. But there was a softness to it, one that didn't exist in his usual calm tone. "I buried myself in work," he continued. "Told myself that if I stayed busy enough, I wouldn't feel the loss. But it doesn't work that way." The silence at home became heavier every month. Emily listened quietly. She didn't interrupt. She could tell this was the first time he had said these words out loud. "And then you arrived," he said, looking at her with a gentleness that made her heart ache. "You brought a kind of warmth I didn't expect. You remind me that I'm still human, that I can care, that I can feel something again." Emily felt something stir inside her. Not romantic desire, but empathy, understanding, and a connection she hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore. "Daniel," she said softly, unsure how to respond. He lifted his hand slightly, stopping her. "You don't need to say anything. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not trying to cross any boundaries. I just didn't want you to think last night was wrong or inappropriate. It was simply honest." Emily nodded. She appreciated his sincerity more than he knew. But before she could say another word, Daniel's phone buzzed loudly on the desk. He glanced at the screen. Immediately, his face changed, draining of color, his calm turning into something sharp and worried. Without thinking, he stood. "Is everything okay?" Emily asked, alarmed. He didn't answer right away. His hands shook slightly as he grabbed his coat from the chair. "My father," he said finally, voice barely steady. "He collapsed. He's in the hospital." Emily's heart sank. "Where?" "Vancouver. I need to leave immediately." Her pulse raced with concern. "Go. Don't worry about work. Just go." Daniel nodded quickly, but before he turned to leave, he really looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. A mix of fear, exhaustion, and something deeper. Something unspoken. "I didn't want our last conversation today to end like this," he said quietly. Then he was gone, walking out of the office, through the hallway, down the elevator, disappearing into a moment far bigger than rumors or awkward conversations. For the rest of the day, Emily barely worked. She kept replaying everything he had said, everything she had felt, everything that had happened in just a few hours. The office whispered around her, but she barely heard any of it. All she could think about was the look on Daniel's face as he rushed out, fear, pain, and something else she didn't want to name. Her heart felt heavy with worry, and yet she couldn't do anything but wait. By evening, she sat alone at her desk, staring at the empty hallway he had walked through. It felt too quiet, too still, like the building itself sensed he was gone. She hoped he was safe. She hoped his father would recover. She hoped he wouldn't face it alone. Emily didn't know it yet, but Daniel's sudden departure was about to change everything, not just for him, but for both of them, because sometimes distance doesn't weaken a connection. Sometimes it reveals it. Daniel's sudden trip to Vancouver changed the rhythm of the office instantly. The next morning, his chair sat empty behind the glass walls of his office, and the absence felt heavier than anyone expected. Meetings were quieter, decisions slower, and the energetic spark that he usually carried through the halls was simply gone. Even the team, who rarely agreed on anything, felt the difference. But no one felt it more than Emily. She tried to stay focused. She tried to drown herself in work, meetings, and deadlines. But her mind kept drifting back to him, his hurried steps, his pale expression, the fear in his eyes when he mentioned his father. She didn't know if she had the right to worry so much, but she did. She worried every hour. It wasn't romance, not exactly. It wasn't friendship either. It was something in between, something deeper, something honest. Something created from shared truths. For 3 days she heard nothing, not a text, not an email, not a single piece of news. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped. Every time she opened her inbox, she hoped to see his name. But each time she was met with silence. And the longer the silence stretched, the more her chest tightened. On the afternoon of the 4th day, she stayed late at the office, unable to stand the tension building inside her. The rest of the team had already left. Only the faint hum of computers and the soft glow from desk lamps kept her company. She gathered her things slowly, preparing to go home when her phone finally lit up. "Daniel, are you still at the office?" Her heart stopped for a beat. She read the message again to make sure it was real. Without hesitating, she typed back, "Emily, yes. Are you okay?" A moment later, the elevator dinged somewhere. Down the hall, Emily turned toward the sound. Footsteps echoed, steady, slow, familiar. Daniel appeared at the end of the hallway. Her breath caught. He looked exhausted, his shoulders tense, a few strands of hair out of place. Dark circles beneath his eyes, but there was something softer in his expression when he saw her. Something that felt almost like relief. He walked toward her, his steps quiet on the polished floor. When he reached her desk, he paused, as if unsure how to begin. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," she replied, her voice barely louder. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full heavy with everything that had happened and everything that had not been said. "Is your father okay?" She finally asked. Daniel let out a slow breath, as though releasing a weight he'd been carrying for days. "He's stable now," he said. "It was a heart complication. Serious, but he's responding to treatment." Emily felt warmth flood her chest. "I'm really glad to hear that." He nodded. "Thank you. It's been a lot." He sat on the edge of her desk, not too close, not too far. His posture was tired but open, as if he didn't want to hide the truth anymore. "I kept wanting to message you," he said quietly, "but every time something happened at the hospital, or I wasn't in the right headspace to put things into words." "You don't need to explain," she said. "No," he replied gently, "I do. You were the first person I thought of when it happened, and the first person I wanted to talk to." He looked down for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "But I didn't want to pull you into my personal chaos." Emily felt her heartbeat shift slow, warm, careful. "Daniel, you wouldn't have been pulling me into anything. I was worried. I didn't know how you were doing." He lifted his gaze, meeting her eyes directly. "I know, and that meant more than I can say." She smiled softly, but she could feel the weight of a question hanging between them. A question neither dared to speak. Daniel seemed to sense it too. He stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the city lights. The skyline glowed softly behind him. "When you came into the meeting room that night," he said, "I didn't expect to say the things I said. I didn't plan it. It just happened." Emily swallowed. "I know. And I meant every word," he added without turning around. Her chest tightened not in fear, but in something deeper. Something honest. He finally turned back to her. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried a quiet emotion she had never seen in him before. "I don't want rumors. I don't want misunderstandings. I don't want you to feel pressured or confused. But I need to be honest." She listened, breath held. "When I was gone," he continued, "I kept thinking about the office and the people and everything that mattered to me. But the thing I kept coming back to was you." Emily felt a softness spread through her, like warmth from a distant fire slowly reaching her skin. "Daniel," she whispered. "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "Not a relationship. Not something complicated. I just needed you to know the truth. Because pretending I don't feel connected to you doesn't make it go away." Emily looked at him, searching for the right words, trying to understand the weight of what he had just shared. "You didn't cross any line," she said gently, "and you didn't make things wrong or inappropriate. You were just human and honest." Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if her words eased something inside him. She stepped closer, not too close, just enough so he could see the sincerity in her eyes. "You don't have to hide your feelings from me. I'm not afraid of them," he exhaled, a soft, relieved breath. They stood there for a moment. To people holding truths they weren't ready to fully name, but also not willing to ignore anymore. "I'm glad you came back," she said quietly. "I'm glad you were here," he replied. Their closeness carried no tension, no hidden intentions, no unspoken promises. Just warmth, respect, understanding, the kind that forms quietly over time and becomes stronger in silence. After a long pause, Daniel glanced at the clock and laughed softly. "We should both go home. It's way too late to still be here." Emily smiled. "Yeah, it is." As they walked toward the elevator together, the air between them felt lighter, still complicated, still delicate, but genuine in a way neither of them questioned anymore. Before the elevator doors closed, Daniel looked at her one last time. "Emily," he said, his voice warm and steady, "whatever happens next, we'll face it honestly. No fear." She nodded, feeling something inside her finally settle. The doors closed, and for the first time since she started at Riverstone Marketing, Emily felt that the story between her and Daniel wasn't a rumor, or a misunderstanding, or a passing moment. It was the beginning of something real. Something neither of them planned. Something that was only just beginning.